Hello and welcome everybody to this first installment of our Elo Hell Gauntlet breakdowns. Now we're going to hit the ground running today and begin with the Titans of Contenders, the Korean region. For this purpose, we brought in the British Super Saiyan himself, LEGDAY. Now, for people who might have been living under the Contenders equivalent of a rock the past 2 years and may not be familiar with you, LEGDAY, why don't you just take a second, tell us about yourself, what you do, how you've done it.
We all need to support Tier 2 rocks. But as for me, I commentate 2 regions of Contenders currently. I commentate both Overwatch Contenders Korea, that we're going to talk about today, and Overwatch Contenders Europe, which I've been doing for 5 seasons now, since the start of 2018. I've also worked on the Overwatch World Cup in Incheon and Paris. And yeah, I'm a vaguely big Korean fanboy, though Jaws might take that title from me as the slightly larger one.
Now, for people who may not have been able to keep up fully with Contenders Korea, which, by the way, shame on you, can you give us a brief rundown of how the season went overall? Who were the major players, and how did we end up with Runaway, Element Mystic, and Gen.g as our Gauntlet representatives from Korea?
Well, one of the really weird things about Korean Contenders this season around was that the biggest story was who lost. Like, we saw arguably the most successful Contenders player ever in Alarm come over with Fusion University to the Korean region, and they got dumpstered. They got absolutely destroyed. Like, they looked like clowns while they were playing these games. They played so many people close, but the 5th map sort of like victory condition that always brought them through in North American Contenders didn't hold out right here, and they fell out, I believe, in the quarterfinals of playoffs, just managing to edge themselves
squeaked their way in.
They
squeaked their way into the playoffs for themselves, right?
So they squeaked their way in there by like someone throwing against WGS, I think. But the obviously playoffs were super exciting and close. But the big story was definitely that the guys who won Atlantic Showdown handily, they barely even broke a sweat winning Atlantic Showdown, are not going to be able to go to Gauntlet because these teams in Korea were just so powerful. And that's like a big power ranking indicator for your armchair analysts that the best Western team to ever exist, who won every single season of Contenders they played in America, got dumpstered. But if we look to the top 3, we've got Gen.g, we've got Element Mystic, we've got Runaway, and unfortunately O2 Blast, the other team in the top 4, did not make it. They went to Pacific Showdown, and they were second to Element Mystic. They both fought through that bracket. And well, it's going to be super exciting to see what the new DPS pickups, or what some of the superstar DPS can do from here. I'm especially interested in Yaki from Runaway.
And I think for O2 specifically, they were really strong in the regular season. To not see them in Gauntlet is a bit of a surprise, I think, but that just goes to show the level of the top 3. I think they kind of leveled up in the final playoffs.
Yeah, definitely, and Yaki especially, like I said before, he was a fresh pickup for Runaway in this season, and he covered over a couple of holes that were in their DPS roster when they were running Decal and Shui instead. And he can bring out any hero, and it's so impressive. He can bring out the Doomfist, he can bring out the Pharah, the Tracer, whatever you want him to play, Yaki will bring it out, and this guy's going to be one of the hottest products to try and recruit for both Academy teams and our teams when he is of age. He might be already, I'm not quite sure exactly how old Yaki is.
Alright, well let's move on. Let's break down each team specifically now, and we're gonna start at the bottom because the top 2 seeds, you should be familiar with Element Mystic and Runaway if you know anything about Contenders, but Gen.g may be a bit more of a surprise on this list. They are the Academy team of Seoul Dynasty, obviously, but what I found really impressive this season, like you mentioned earlier, they knocked out O2 Blast in the playoffs, and O2 Blast were undoubtedly the best team in the regular season. It was a convincing win. How did Gen.g get that done? And what kind of chance do you think they stand here in Gauntlet?
I think Gen.g stand a pretty good chance, and I think a lot of that comes down to powering their tank line. Wu Yal is one of the most flexible players in all of Contenders. He can play almost all of the DPS roles as well as any tank that you want him on. Of course, he did come from London Spitfire. He was there when they won Stage 1 of the Overwatch League back last year in the inaugural season, and I think he's going to be a really huge asset on Sigma to the presumed meta of an Orisa and Sigma tank line alongside Oberon. But when I look at Gen.g as well, and I think about raw talent, Stalker might have some of the best mechanical tracking I've seen since the Fran. I've seen a little bit of his play on Sombra back when she was a bit more meta. and his aim is just insane. I'm not sure if it will help him out as much in this meta, so I would not be surprised to see a Glister-Wakid duo, where one of them plays Reaper and the other one plays Doomfist, because it's not quite as finessed in terms of the aiming mechanics you need as much as the decision making. I think Glister and Wakid may well have a bit more seniority there compared to Stalker.
And I would say they also had a little bit more experience coming out of this season, right?
Yeah, for sure. Stalker was sort of playing the bench. You bring him in when you need that really mechanically skilled DPS, but Glister also fills out, whereas Wakid, he's like Wuyal. Like, one of the biggest boons for Gen G is that both Wuyal and Wakid are equally flexible and they can both play anything. Of course, with Rollock now, that's a little bit more sort of narrowed down, but Wakid, strangely, has one of the most potent Junkrats at the moment, which is a bit of a weird champ, but it works out.
Do you think he'll bring that Junkrat out, or just stick to the meta for them?
It depends if we see teams flex over off of Sigma and Orisa compositions, because while the shield break from him is super good, you may see him come out when people bring out a Reinhardt sometimes. It's not overly meta at the moment, but we've seen it a couple of times during the recent Rivalcade 5k Rumble, so maybe there are some sort of like progenitors of future metas coming up there. You can't discount these kinds of competitions, because that's where Goats really gained popularity in one of those Rivalcade Rumbles when it just smashed NRG.
Alright, well, enough about Gen G. Let's move on to our second seeded team, the Pacific Showdown champions, Element Mystic. Now, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Sparkle is going to show up with a massive grin on his face, since we're walking into what's likely going to be a Doomfist meta like we've been talking about, right? But my question, as someone who's not as familiar with the hero pools in Contenders Korea, is where does Doha fit into this? Because isn't he mostly just a Sombra one-trick, or does he have more of that flexibility to pair alongside his DPS duo?
Doha was actually the go-to Brigitte as well back in Goats meta, and he's got a very good Hanzo as well. But I think Doha probably going to be subbed out a lot for Eggsy during the course of this particular gauntlet, because I think Eggsy is a better choice to come out with the Reaper and with many hit scan heroes as well, but usually you put your hit scan specialist on for Reaper, and we have seen Eggsy sort of like dragged off of the bench multiple times for Element Mystic to try and make an impact. For people who've prepared for something slightly different, expecting Doha to come out on the Sombra, or on the Reaper, or on his Hanzo as well. But like you said, Sparkle, he's already planning where to spend his prize money. He's got an Amazon shopping list ready to go. He's like, okay, boys, I'll catch you when I'm done. I've got some highlight reels to make.
I think for Element Mystic, Sparkle is, God, I can't believe I'm making this pun, but is definitely the shining spot for this roster.
Ooh.
What about their, yeah, okay, I get it. What about their tank line though? Because I think when we talk about Element Mystic, we often get caught up in their flashy DPS line, but we don't really get to talk about their tanks and support so much. And do you think Element Mystic, has the power to sort of sustain their way through the bracket?
Well, when it comes to Element Mystic's tank line, it's actually kind of interesting because they have two main tanks on roster. And they used to bring in Alpha a lot more when they wanted for Reinhardt, because he seems to be the superior Reinhardt to Takayaki, who they bring in more when they want to bring out an Orisa or another main tank. But having two main tanks can actually be a huge boon. This was demonstrated very potently during our Owl playoffs by Atlanta Reign, who ran both Gator and Pokepo, because Sigma incorporates a lot of the sensibilities that are natural to main tanks. So he was a better fit for that role of Sigma as a secondary main tank than either Dako or Fried. So I think that there is a chance here that Element Mystic can bring out the double main tank, and it'll be quite impressive to watch. But Hanbin, very reliable on these off tanks. He could still be the go-to player for Sigma, especially considering that he has workable synergy with both of his main tanks. Whereas the main tanks probably haven't played that much together before, because it's the same role, and I don't think we've ever had another meta where we really have two main tanks unless you're running double Winston and no hero lock.
Yeah, even when we did see double main tank at times during certain specific metas, it was often the off tank would play, some of those other quote-unquote main tanks, like the Winston, for example. But yeah, I can definitely see that being an interesting look here for Element Mystic. And I think the story then becomes Element Mystic is a team to watch out for, not just because of what we know they can bring, but also what we don't know they can bring. And I think that's probably more exciting for people watching.
Absolutely, but it does mean that they will be found out before they have to go up against Runaway, because obviously some of the teams have buys, and Element Mystic's going to have to fight through Group A. But maybe when we look at Element Mystic's group, they don't have to go as hard in revealing the strats, so we may see like mid-tournament swap-ups from them.
Well, we're going to talk about Group A in just a minute, but before we do that, we do have to mention our number one seed, Runaway, who came alive in the postseason after a somewhat middling regular season, but much like the Vancouver Titans, they always find their way through the muck. Now, you talked about Yaki coming into this DPS lineup a little earlier, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts on that, but first I want to pick your brain about their tank line, because like we just mentioned with Element Mystic, Orisa Sigma, very much a mainstay of the meta. How do you think Mag and QOQ will fare on those heroes?
I think QOQ is probably one of the most talented flex tanks that we've ever seen, really. Like, just straight up. QOQ in Contenders has always been incredibly impressive, so I think he's going to be very good at picking up the Sigma, but I think the main advantage that this tank line has between QOQ and Mag, so they picked up a new coach in Kuki, who's an Overwatch League tier main tank, so he understands how these tanking interactions work on a far deeper level than potentially some other coaches do at the moment, and that may very well inform QOQ and Mag's playstyle to be a lot more facilitating to a big playmaker like Yaki.
Alright, now that we've gone over our teams, let's talk about the Gauntlet itself. Runaway being the number 1 seed from Korea, who won the Pacific Showdown, they get to skip the group stage entirely and begin in the knockout bracket. But let's look at those groups. First up, let's talk about Element Mystic in Group A, alongside Talon Esports from Pacific Contenders, HSL Esports from EU, and XL2 from North America. How badly is Element Mystic going to dumpster this team, and do we need an ambulance on standby at the Gauntlet?
It's kind of possible, really. Like, as much as I love my home region of EU, HSL they're a really good team, but I don't think they've got the correct environment to really do hugely well in the Gauntlet. They're mostly able to scrim World Cup teams at the moment in EU. HSL as an org does not have the resources to take everyone to go boot camp in Korea, which also means, but not only are they not getting the optimal practice that the other teams are getting over there in a LAN environment with good teams in Korea, but also they're going to be more affected by jet lag by the time the event comes around, whereas other teams are going to have an extra 2 or 3 weeks to acclimatize to the Korean time zone. So I think HSL are sort of like going up against a stacked deck, and I think if HSL can come up with any wins, I will be hugely proud of them considering the circumstances they find themselves in, and with their players also practicing for national teams as well, since BlizzCon is basically like 2 or 3 weeks after Gauntlet culminates, and that doesn't give a huge amount of time. And then HSL, as EU people, they're going to be moving between 3 time zones for those things as well, so it's going to be super stressful on them.
It should be mentioned that a lot of teams are already in Korea practicing, so this is even worse for HSL, that they don't have a ton of time. Any performance from them, in all honesty, will be very impressive.
Yeah, so they're up against the stacked deck. They are definitely the underdog here. XL2 Academy, I think, have the most capacity to squander a good hand, I think. Like, they've got a lot of resources behind them. They can get input from people like Pavane in their parent org, who have a good understanding of this meta. We saw how deep the run from NYXL into the playoffs was. These guys definitely understand what they're doing, and they just need to be able to translate that into their academy team's performance at Gauntlet. And you know that scouts from every single Overwatch League team are going to be going to the Gauntlet. That may include some of the coaching staff of these Gauntlet teams, or the academy teams, who will be there to assist, should it be required. As for Talon Esports, I think they have a wild card, and they could pop off, because they've had a lot of time to scrim against Korean teams. They're likely very much in the know as to how these Korean teams are playing in the current meta, and I think Talon Esports are going to be super happy if they can take down both EU and NA, and try and claim second place in this group.
So try and claim second place. So you are just fully admitting that Element Mystic is coming out with the win.
Element Mystic they're going to dumpster people. Like, at risk of this being quoted and copy-pasted for all of time, Element Mystic are about to make clowns of everyone else in that group.
Here, I'll join you on it. If Element Mystic don't get first in their group, I am very concerned.
Alright, well, I can't wait to see both of you be wrong, but we gotta talk about the other group. We gotta talk about Gen.g in Group B, alongside Envy and Gladiators Legion from North America, and LGE Huya from China. Now, this isn't necessarily a group that's as easy for a third place seed to dominate, but do you still feel pretty confident about Gen.g coming into this?
I think Gen.g are going to have a pretty good time here. As well, because they're also going to be in their home country, don't have to deal with jet lag and travel prior. I think that they've got the talent to at least go through to the finals bracket. I don't know if they're going to win out this group. Like, I'm tied between Gen G and Team Envy, because I've got a lot of love for Team Envy, obviously. They're some smart boys because they decided to steal the British Hurricane tank line in Unlocked and Happycool, and that's a huge play. And then you got people like Jaru, Sharp, and Crimzo on this roster, and Fire, of course. I didn't want to leave one person out. But Jaru and Sharp, I think, can really make some huge inroads in this meta. Sharp's a very talented hit scan. Jaru as a flex, I think, can get a really good Doomfist on the go. The real question is going to be how Crimzo and Fire try and make the Moira and Lucio work, I think, because I don't know a huge amount about Crimzo or the Moira. It's a hard hero to really shine on, but maybe you can eke out a little bit of extra performance when you've got someone as good as Crimzo in that role.
And historically, Crimzo has been known for his flex support, specifically the Ana and the Zenyatta, where he's been very flashy. I mean, we only have to look back to the last World Cup. Yeah, where Team Canada kind of made Team Canada look absolutely fantastic in that support line. So
I wonder if lafon has any bias in this particular
Canada. Arena. Nothing whatsoever. Absolutely none.
I have never known lafon to be biased toward Canada. If anything, he puts them lower. But LEGDAY, you've been a phenomenal guest. Now it's time for us to be not phenomenal hosts and put you in the hot seat. Ask the big question. Which team is going to be 100% the winner of the first ever Overwatch Contenders Gauntlet?
Can I say the player that's going to win it? Because Sparkle's going to win it. It's all about Doomfist, and you got the best Doomfist in Contenders, possibly the world, in Sparkle. I may just sound like a fanboy, but I think he's just going to clinch it for Element Mystic.
So what I'm hearing is Runaway here from LEGDAY. Perfect, as we all expected.
Like, Runaway, I think, can definitely win out on a tank line fight because of Kuki and the coach role. But when it just comes to full-on impact with a Doomfist, especially in a double shield meta, if you can't force Sparkle off that and you go for mirror Doomfist, you're not going to have a good time.
It's tough to argue against a Sparkle Doomfist for sure.
All right, well, that'll be it for us here today. The Gauntlet is coming up. LEGDAY, where can people find your wonderful brain?
You can find my wonderful brain and my wonderful face as well at Twitter, at LEGDAY Gaming. Twitch is also LEGDAY Gaming. And my Instagram is LEGDAY Cast. You got to have some variety in my branding, you know, boys.
Well, that'll be it for us today. Make sure you watch the Gauntlet and support Tier 2. If you like this video, there's a button for that down below. And if not, leave us a comment. We're always looking to improve. But either way, make sure you stay tuned to Elohel Esports for more Overwatch content.